The great tribunal chamber stretched wide like the belly of some ancient beast, and inside it gathered the representatives of 37 different species from across. The known galaxy commander Vethril of the Dominion fleet stood at the center platform, his crystalline teeth catching the light as he surveyed the room with cold satisfaction. He had conquered 11 species in his career and had never once tasted defeat. His body was covered in plates of natural armor that gleamed like polished obsidian, and his forearms were folded behind his back in a pose of absolute authority. The Dominion had called this tribunal for one purpose: to claim the coordinates of a small blue planet called Earth, home to a species that had only recently discovered faster than light travel. The other species in the chamber watched with varying degrees of interest and fear. Some hoped to see another world fall under Dominion control, while others secretly prayed that something might finally challenge the empire that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of cycles. The binge chamber doors opened with a soft hiss of air, and every eye turned to witness the arrival of humanity's representative. What walked through those doors made several delegates lean forward in confusion. She was small by galactic standards, standing barely tall enough to reach Vethril's chest. Her skin was soft and unarmored, her body wrapped in a simple gray uniform with no visible weapons. Her hair was dark with streaks of silver, pulled back from a face that showed the lines of many years. She was Captain Elise Morrow of the Earth Defense Council, and she walked into that chamber of monsters like she was entering her own living room. Behind her came nothing: no soldiers, no guards, no advisors, no translators, just one middle-aged human woman with steady hands and calm eyes. She walked to the center of the chamber where a single chair had been placed, and she sat down, crossing one leg over the other and folding her hands. In her lap, Vethril watched her approach with his compound eyes narrowing in what might have been amusement or irritation. "You were instructed to bring your champion," he announced, his voice booming through the translation devices that filled the chamber. "Where is your warrior, human?" Morrow looked up at him, and her expression did not change. "You are looking at her," she said simply. The chamber erupted in sounds that served as laughter for dozens of different species, clicking and gurgling and hissing and whistling, a symphony of mockery that bounced off the curved walls. A delegate from the Krethvani swarm, a creature built like a praying mantis with blades for arms, chittered loudly. "The humans send us an elder female with no weapons. They have surrendered already." More laughter followed, and Vethril allowed himself a smile that showed rows of crystalline teeth. "Perhaps the humans are wiser than we thought," he said. "They know when they are beaten." Morrow did not respond to the laughter. She did not flinch or blush or show any sign that she had heard the mockery at all. She simply sat in her chair and watched Vethril with eyes that reminded some delegates of something they could not quite name: the arbiter of the tribunal, an ancient being whose species had given up physical form long ago and now existed as patterns of light flickered at the head of the chamber. "The protocols must be observed," the arbiter announced, "before any species may be granted protection or condemned to conquest. Their representative must demonstrate their combat doctrine, the philosophy by which their people survive." Vethril nodded, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Of course," he said. "Let us see what humanity has to offer." The demonstrations began with the Dominion itself. Vethril stepped onto the demonstration platform and summoned a holographic opponent, a perfect replica of a Dominion warrior. He destroyed it in 3 moves, his natural armor absorbing the strikes while his forearms delivered killing blows with mechanical precision. The chamber responded with respectful silence. Everyone knew the Dominion's strength. Next came the Krethvani, whose champion moved so fast that most species could only see a blur of motion. The holographic opponent was cut into pieces before it could even raise its weapon. And the Krethvani champion stood amid the falling fragments with blades dripping holographic blood. The Molocher delegate demonstrated their regeneration. They allowed themselves to be torn apart by simulated weapons, only to pull themselves back together within moments. Their flesh knitting like water flowing back into a cup. The Sylph Collective sent forward a single representative. But that representative moved with the perfect coordination of 1,000 minds working as one. Every step was calculated by 1,000,000 brains. Every strike guided by the accumulated combat experience of an entire species. Each demonstration are murmurs of respect or whispers of fear. The galaxy was filled with terrors, and every species present had earned their place through some advantage that made them difficult to destroy finally. The Arbiter's light pulsed and turned toward the human Captain Morrow of Earth, the Arbiter announced. You may now demonstrate humanity's combat doctrine. The chamber fell silent. Delegates leaned forward in their seats, curious to see what secret the humans had been hiding, some weapon or ability that had given them the courage to send a single unarmed woman into a room full of predators. Morrow remained in her chair. She did not stand, did not move toward the demonstration platform, did not summon any holographic opponents. She simply sat there, her hands still folded in her lap, her eyes still fixed on Veth Ralsikon's past. Then, a full minute, the silence in the chamber grew uncomfortable. Velol's mandibles began to click with irritation. Human, he said, you have been instructed to demonstrate your combat doctrine. Do you not understand the protocols? Morrow tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. I understand them perfectly, Commander. Then why do you not move? Because I have already begun my demonstration. The chamber buzzed with confused whispers. What was she talking about? She was sitting in a chair doing nothing. Vethrol stepped closer to her, his massive form casting a shadow over her seated figure. You mock this tribunal, he growled. You mock the Dominion itself. I assure you, Commander, I am completely serious. Then explain yourself. What combat doctrine involves sitting still like prey waiting to be eaten? Morrow looked up at him, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something that made Vethrol's instinct scream. A warning he did not understand. You asked what our combat style is, she said calmly. I told you that you are seeing it. I see nothing. Yes, Morrow agreed, and a small smile touched her lips. That is exactly the point. Vethra stared at her, and for the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt a cold sensation settle deep in his chest. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. Something that whispered to him that he had made a terrible miscalculation. The human sat in her chair, surrounded by the deadliest beings in the galaxy, and she smiled at him like she knew something he did not. And the worst part was this, he was beginning to suspect that she did. The tribunal chamber had witnessed many things over its long history, battles and betrayals, declarations of war and offers of surrender, the rise of empires and the fall of civilizations, but it had never witnessed anything like this, too. Hours had passed since Captain Elise Morrow had begun her so-called demonstration. And in all that time, she had done absolutely nothing. She sat in her chair at the center of the chamber, her posture relaxed but alert, her hands still folded in her lap, her eyes moving slowly across the room like she was memorizing every face and every reaction. The delegates from 37 species watched her with growing confusion and irritation. This is absurd, the Krethvani champion hissed, his blade arms twitching with nervous energy. She is stalling for time. Her fleet must be preparing some attack. The Arbiter's light flickered thoughtfully. Our sensors detect no unusual activity from the human vessel, the ancient being replied. Their single ship remains in orbit, weapons cold, shields down. Then she is mad, the Molocher delegate gurgled, his regenerating flesh rippling with what might have been laughter. The humans have sent us a broken mind. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber, but Commander Vethral did not join in the mockery. Stood at the edge of the demonstration platform, his forearms now unfolded and hanging at his sides, his compound eyes never leaving the human woman. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. In the ancient instincts that had kept his species alive through countless generations of war, this human was not broken. And she was not mad. She was doing something. He just could not see what it was. Human, he said, stepping closer to her chair. This farce has continued long enough. Demonstrate your combat abilities or admit that your species has none. Morrow looked at him with those calm, steady eyes. I am demonstrating them. Commander, you are sitting. Yes, that is not combat. Morrow tilted her head slightly, and that small smile returned to her face. Are you certain about that? Vethral's mandibles clicked together in frustration. He turned to the Arbiter, his crystalline teeth grinding. I demand that this mockery end. The human has failed to demonstrate any combat doctrine, and therefore humanity should be ruled as a conquest species. The Arbiter considered this request, its light shifting through several colors. The protocols do not specify how a combat doctrine must be demonstrated, the ancient being replied. They only require that the demonstration continue until the representative yields or the tribunal reaches a judgment. Then make a judgment. I cannot. The demonstration is ongoing. Vethral spun back toward Morrow. Then I will end it myself. He took a step toward her, his body language shifting into something aggressive and threatening. Morrow did not move. She did not flinch or lean away or show any sign of fear. She simply watched him approach with those patient, unblinking eyes, and something about that stillness made Vethral stop mid-steve. Told himself it was strategy, that killing an unarmed representative would damage the Dominion's reputation among the neutral species, but deep down, in a place he did not want to examine, he knew the truth. He had stopped because she had not reacted. Every species he had ever conquered had shown fear when he approached them with violence in his posture trembling, backing away, raising defenses, begging for mercy. This human did none of those things, sat in her chair and watched him like she was studying an interesting insect. And that lack of reaction disturbed him more than any weapon could have. Commander, one of his officers whispered from the Dominion delegation's seating area. Perhaps we should wait, let her tire herself out. Vethral's mandibles snapped in irritation, but he stepped back from the human. Fine, he growled. We will wait. And so the waiting continued. The third hour passed. Then the fourth delegates began to shift in their seats, some of them clearly uncomfortable. The Krethvani champion paced back and forth behind his delegation's barrier, his predator instincts screaming at him that stillness meant ambush, that the human was about to strike at any moment, but she never struck. She just sat there, watching, waiting. That small smile occasionally touching her lips when she caught someone staring at Herb. The fifth hour. Something strange began to happen. The delegates started talking to each other, not in the formal diplomatic language of the tribunal, but in whispered conversations that Vethral could not quite hear. He caught fragments here and there, words like patient and disturbing and what is she waiting for? The Sylph Collective's representative had begun to move erratically, their hive mind coordination disrupted by the tension in the room. 1,000 minds were trying to predict what the human would do next, and their failure to find an answer was causing fractures in their shared consciousness. She's just sitting, the Sylph representative muttered, their voice carrying the echoes of many beings speaking at once. Why is she just sitting? Morrow heard the question and turned her head to look at the Sylph. Would you like me to stand? She asked politely. The Sylph representative flinched back as if she had drawn a weapon. No, I mean, why would you? What are you doing? I told you, Morrow replied. I am demonstrating humanity's combat doctrine, but you are doing nothing. Am I? Morrow's eyes moved across the chamber. taking in the restless delegates, the frustrated Dominion commander, the confused and frightened faces all around her. "Look at this room," she said, her voice calm and clear. "3 hours ago, you were all laughing at me. You thought I was weak, foolish, defeated before I had even begun." Her smile widened just slightly. "Are you laughing now?" Silence answered her. "I have not raised a hand," she continued. "I have not made a threat. I have not moved from this chair. And yet every single one of you is more afraid now than you were when I walked through those doors." Vethral's mandibles clicked angrily. "We are not afraid of you, human." "Then why are your hands shaking, Commander?" Vethral looked down at his forearms and felt a surge of cold fury when he realized she was right. His hands were trembling. Not much, but enough to notice. He forced them to stillness. But the damage was done. Everyone in the chamber had seen it. The human had made the grade. Commander Vethral of the Dominion fleet, shake with nothing more than patience and a smile. And now the whispers were growing louder, spreading through the delegations like fire through dry grass. What else can she do? Someone asked, "What happens when she stands up?" Another voice wondered, "What are the humans hiding?" Morrow sat in her chair and listened to the fear take root. And she knew that the demonstration was proceeding exactly as planned. The 6th hour began. And the chamber that had laughed at her now watched her in terrified silence, waiting for a blow that might never come, and somehow, that was worse than any weapon she could have carried. The 9th hour arrived, and the tribunal chamber had transformed into something unrecognizable. What had started as a simple judgment hearing had become a test of endurance that no one had prepared for. And the cracks were beginning to show in ways that even Captain Morrow had not fully anticipated. 3 of the smaller delegations had already left. The Vorn Syndicate had cited urgent business elsewhere before hurrying out of the chamber with their tails literally between their legs. The merchants of Theta Prime had followed shortly after, muttering about scheduling conflicts that everyone knew were invented. The crystal singers of Uramax had simply vanished without explanation, their shimmering forms fading from their seats like morning mystique departure sent ripples of unease through the remaining delegations. These were not weak species. The Vorn had survived a century of border wars. The merchants had navigated the most dangerous trade routes in the galaxy. And the Crystal Singers had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. If they were leaving, what did they know that the others did not? Commander Vethral watched the departures with growing fury. "Cowards," he snarled, his mandibles clicking like stones grinding together. "They flee from a single human who has done nothing but sit." "Perhaps that is exactly why they flee," one of his officers suggested quietly. "The unknown is often more frightening than the known." Vethral spun toward the officer with murder in his eyes. "Are you suggesting that the Dominion should fear this soft, weak, weaponless creature?" The officer lowered his gaze. "No, Commander. I am simply observing that others seem to." Vethral turned back to stare at Morrow, who remained exactly where she had been for the past 9 hours, seated, calm, patient, her eyes moving slowly across the room like she was recording everything she saw. She had eaten nothing, drunk nothing, shown no sign of fatigue or discomfort. She simply sat there and watched them all fall apart. "This is a trick," Vethral announced loudly, addressing the entire chamber. "The humans are using some form of psychological manipulation, perhaps a drug in the air, or a sound frequency we cannot detect." The Arbiter's light flickered. "Our sensors have analyzed the atmosphere and acoustic environment thoroughly," the ancient being replied. "There are no unusual substances or frequencies present. The only thing the human has introduced to this chamber is herself. Then she must be doing something." "She is," the Arbiter agreed. "She is sitting. It appears to be her entire strategy. And it appears to be working." Vethral's crystalline teeth ground together, so hard that a few of the delegates nearby flinched at the sound across the chamber. The Krethvani champion had stopped pacing and now stood frozen. His blade arms raised slightly, as if preparing for an attack that refused to come his. Species were apex predators. They were built to hunt, to chase, to strike at movement and weakness, but Morrow offered no movement and showed no weakness. She was like a stone in the middle of a stream, and the current of the Krethvani's predator instincts broke against her stillness without effect. "I cannot take this anymore," the champion hissed to his delegation leader. "Let me kill her and end this farce." "You will do no such thing," the leader replied sharply. "We do not know what she is. Killing her might trigger something worse. She is just a human." "Is she?" The champion fell silent, his compound eyes fixed on Morrow with something that looked disturbingly like fear nearby. The Sylph Collective's representative had begun to fragment. The hive mind that usually moved their shared body with perfect coordination was now pulling in different directions. One part wanted to flee, another wanted to attack, a third wanted to simply wait and see what happened. The result was a twitching, jerking motion that made the representative look almost sick. "We cannot predict her," the Sylph said, their voice now a discordant chorus of conflicting opinions. "1,000 minds are working on the problem, and we cannot predict her. She gives us nothing to analyze, nothing to anticipate, nothing to fear except the absence of something to fear." Morrow heard this and turned her head toward the Sylph. "That must be very uncomfortable for you," she said, with what sounded like genuine sympathy. The Sylph representative flinched again. "Are you mocking us?" "No," Morrow replied. "I am observing. Your species survives through prediction and coordination. And I imagine it is very difficult when you encounter something you cannot model. What are you?" The Sylph demanded, their voice rising with panic. "What kind of creature sits in a room full of predators and feels nothing?" Morrow considered the question for a moment. "I never said I feel nothing," she replied. "I simply choose not to show it. There is a difference. That is worse." "I know." The Sylph representative retreated to the far edge of their seating area, their fragmented movements becoming even more erratic by the 11th hour. The mood in the chamber had shifted from confusion to something deeper and darker. Were no longer whispering, they were arguing openly, their voices rising in languages that the translation devices struggled to keep up with. "This cannot be allowed to continue," the Molocher delegate bellowed, his regenerating flesh pulsing with agitation. "The Dominion must force a resolution." "The Dominion does not take orders from you," Vethril snapped back. "Then do something, Commander. You claim to be the greatest military power in the galaxy. So prove it." "How would you suggest I prove it? By attacking an unarmed woman who has not threatened anyone?" "If that is what it takes." Vethral's eyes narrowed. "And what would the other species think of the Dominion if we struck down a defenseless representative simply because she refused to fight back?" The Molocher fell silent, realizing the trap if the Dominion attacked Morrow. They would appear brutal and cowardly bullies who could not handle an opponent, who refused to play their game. But if they did not attack, they appeared weak and indecisive, unable to act against a single human who was making them all look foolish. Either way, the Dominion lost, and that, Morrow knew, was exactly the point. She allowed herself a small, private smile as she watched the argument spread through the chamber. The Dominion's allies were starting to question their leader. The neutral species were starting to reconsider their positions. And the species who had long suffered under Dominion rule were starting to see something they had never seen before. Hope. Feel because she had sat in a chair and refused to be afraid. The 12th hour arrived, and Vethril finally approached her again. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "Name your price. What will it take to end this demonstration?" Morrow looked up at him, and for the first time since the tribunal began, she spoke to him as if they were equals. "I want you to understand something, Commander." "What?" I want you to understand that you have already lost. Vethral's mandibles twitched. That is impossible. Nothing has happened. Everything has happened, Morrow replied. Look around you. Your allies are doubting you. Your enemies are gaining courage. And the neutral species are realizing that the Dominion can be beaten without a single shot being fired. She leaned forward slightly, and even that small movement made Vethral take an involuntary step backward. I have not moved from this chair, she said softly. And I have already changed the balance of power in this galaxy. Imagine what will happen when I stand up. Vethral stared at her, and for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do. The human sat before him like a puzzle he could not solve, a weapon he could not counter, an enemy he could not fight, and the worst part was that she was right. He had already lost. He just had not realized it until now. The 14th hour came, and with it came the breaking point, but it did not come from Captain Morrow. And it did not come from the Dominion. It came from the Yareth combined. The Yareth were a quiet species, small, gray-skinned beings with large dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. For 300 cycles they had lived under the shadow of the Dominion, forced to pay tribute and provide resources while their own people starve. They had come to this tribunal expecting to witness another conquest, another species crushed beneath the Dominion's heel. They had not expected this. Elder Vethkai of the Yareth rose from his seat slowly, his frail body trembling with the effort. The chamber fell silent as he made his way down to the main floor, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. He stopped a few meters from Morrow's chair and looked at her with those dark, absorbing eyes. I wish to understand, he said, his voice thin but steady. Your fleets are small. We have seen the reports. You have perhaps 100 ships, capable of faster-than-light travel. Morrow nodded. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. Vethkai continued. Your weapons are generations behind the Dominion's. Your shields are weak. Your armor is thin. All true, Morrow agreed. Your bodies are fragile, the Elder said, gesturing at her with one slender hand. You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. You cannot regenerate. You cannot split your consciousness. You cannot even see in more than 3 dimensions. Also true. Then explain to me. Human, what gives you the right to sit in that chair as if you have already won? The chamber held its breath. Morrow was silent for a moment, her eyes meeting the Elder's gaze with something that looked almost like respect. May I tell you a story, Elder Vethkai? The Yareth tilted his head. I would like that very much. Morrow nodded and settled back in a chair. Long ago, before my species had starships, before we had guns or swords or even fire, we were not the dominant creatures on our planet. We were prey. A murmur ran through the chamber. Prey? The humans were claiming to be prey? Our world was filled with predators, Morrow continued. Creatures with fangs and claws and speed that we could never match. They were stronger than us, faster than us, deadlier in every way that should have mattered. Then how did you survive? Vethkai asked. We learned to do something that no other creature on our planet could do. We learned to be patient. Morrow's eyes moved across the chamber, meeting the gazes of delegates who quickly looked away. When we hunted, we did not chase our prey the way other predators did. We could not outrun them. So we did not try. Instead, we followed. Followed? Yes, we would find an animal, and we would begin walking after it, not running, not sprinting, just walking. The animal would see us and flee, putting distance between us, but we would keep walking. Hours would pass, and the animal would stop to rest, thinking it was safe, but then it would see us again. Still coming, still walking, never stopping. The chamber was absolutely silent now. We call it persistence hunting, Morrow said. The animal would run again, and we would keep following. It would run and rest. Run and rest, but we never rested, never stopped, never gave it a moment of peace. Eventually, after hours or even days, the animal's heart would give out from the stress of being watched, being followed, being hunted by something that simply would not stop. Elder Vethkai's dark eyes had grown even wider. You killed your prey with patience? We killed our prey with fear, Morrow corrected gently. The running did not kill them. The knowledge that we were still coming killed them. They could not fight us because we would not engage. They could not flee because we would not stop following. They could not rest because every time they closed their eyes, we would be closer when they opened them. She paused and let that sink in. That is what humans are. Elder Vethkai, we are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest. We are not the most technologically advanced. But we are patient, and we remember, and we never, ever stop. The Molocher delegate made a sound that might have been a nervous laugh. You expect us to believe that you could defeat the Dominion by walking after them? Morrow turned her calm gaze toward him. I have been sitting in this chair for 14 hours, she said. I have not threatened anyone. I have not raised a weapon. I have done nothing but watch and wait, and in that time, 3 delegations have fled. The Dominion's alliance has begun to fracture. And Commander Vethral's hands have not stopped shaking since hour 6. The Molocher fell silent. That is what patience does. Morrow continued. It makes you fight yourselves every moment I sit here doing nothing. You imagine what I might be planning every hour that passes without an attack. You wonder when the attack will come. The fear grows not from what I do, but from what I might do. She turned back to Elder Vethkai. The Dominion has conquered species who fought back, she said. That is easy combat has clear rules, clear winners and losers, clear endpoints. But what do you do with a species that refuses to fight? What do you do with prey that is not afraid of you? Vethkai was trembling now, but not with fear, with something else. Something that looked almost like hope. You cannot conquer patience, Morrow said softly. You can only wait for it to conquer you. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates were shouting over each other. Some demanding that the tribunal be ended. Others demanding that the human be arrested. Still others demanding that the Dominion answer for their crimes against species like the Yorath, Rauadal. Commander Vethral stood frozen, staring at Morrow with an expression that had finally settled into recognition. He understood now. He understood what she had been doing. Since the moment she walked through those doors, she had not come here to fight. She had come here to demonstrate that fighting was not necessary. She had turned the Dominion's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. They were built for war, built for conquest, built to crush resistance and break spirits, but you cannot crush something that does not resist. You cannot break a spirit that refuses to acknowledge your power. You cannot conquer someone who simply sits in a chair and waits for you to defeat yourself. Earl looked around at the chaos in the chamber, his allies pulling away from him, at his enemies gaining courage, at the centuries-old order of the galaxy shifting beneath his feet. And he realized that he had been outmaneuvered by an opponent who had never moved a single muscle. The human sat in her chair, surrounded by screaming aliens, and she smiled at him with something that looked almost like sympathy. She knew what he was feeling. She had known since the beginning, and that, more than anything else, was what finally broke him. What do you want? He whispered, his voice lost beneath the chaos. What do you actually want? Morrow heard him anyway. I want you to leave humanity alone, she replied. And I want you to remember this day. I want you to tell your superiors what happened here. I want the entire Dominion to know that you came to claim a planet and found something you could not conquer. And if we refuse? Morrow's smile widened just slightly. Then we will follow you, Commander, across every light year. Through every generation, we will be patient, and we will wait, and eventually, your empire will make a mistake that we can use. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow cut through all the noise. and we will never, ever stop. The 23rd hour arrived, and the tribunal chamber was a shadow of what it had been when the day began. Half the delegations had departed, some fleeing in obvious terror, others leaving with quiet dignity, but all of them carrying the same message back to their home worlds. Human had not moved from her chair. The Dominion's officers had scattered throughout the chamber, no longer standing in their unified formation behind Commander Veth Rall. They were arguing among themselves now, their voices carrying through the translation devices in sharp, angry bursts. "This is a disaster," one officer hissed. "The Kethmer Alliance has already sent word that they are reconsidering their treaty with us. 30 cycles of diplomacy undone in a single day. The Outer Rim colonies are asking questions," another added. "They want to know why we cannot defeat a species that refuses to fight back. Because you cannot defeat them," Vethril said quietly, and his officers fell silent in shock at the admission. "I understand that now." He stood alone at the edge of the demonstration platform, his massive form somehow diminished, his forearms hanging loose at his sides. The crystalline teeth that had gleamed with such confidence at the start of the tribunal now looked dull and worn. He had not slept in nearly a full rotation, and the exhaustion was beginning to show in ways that his natural armor could not hide across the chamber. Elder Vethkai of the Yareth sat with his delegation, but they were no longer cowering in their assigned seats. They had moved closer to the center, closer to the human, and their dark eyes watched her with something that looked almost like worship. The Arbiter's light pulsed at the head of the chamber, drawing everyone's attention. "The time has come for a ruling," the ancient being announced. "Commander Vethral of the Dominion Fleet, do you wish to maintain your claim on the species known as humanity?" The chamber fell silent. Every remaining eye turned toward Vethral. Waiting for his answer, the commander was still for a long moment, his compound eyes fixed on Morrow's seated form. She looked exactly as she had at the start, calm, patient, alert, as if she could sit in that chair for another 23 hours without complaint. And the terrible thing was, Vethral believed she could. "Commander," the Arbiter prompted. "Your answer?" Vethral's mandibles clicked slowly, the sound echoing through the silent chamber. "The Dominion," he said, each word coming with obvious difficulty, "withdraws its claim." The chamber erupted. Some delegates cheered, others gasped. Still others simply stared in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The mighty Dominion, conquerors of 11 species, rulers of 1,000 star systems, had just surrendered to a single human woman who had never raised a hand against them. Morrow remained seated through all of it, her expression unchanged, only her eyes moved, tracking the reactions throughout the chamber, noting which species were celebrating and which were merely calculating. When the noise finally died down, the Arbiter spoke again. "Captain Morrow of Earth, your demonstration has concluded. Do you have any final words for this tribunal?" Morrow nodded, and finally, for the first time in 23 hours, she rose from her chair. The movement was slow and deliberate, each muscle working smoothly despite the long hours of stillness. Delegates who had been leaning forward instinctively drew back, suddenly uncertain what this standing human might do. Morrow stretched her neck, rolled her shoulders, and took a moment to straighten her gray uniform. Then she walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She paused at the doors and turned to look at Vethral one final time. "Commander," she said, "I want you to understand something." Vethral's mandibles twitched, but he did not respond. "Humanity did not want this confrontation," Morrow continued. "We did not seek you out. We did not ask to be threatened. We simply wanted to explore the stars in peace." She took a step closer to him. "And even now, even after 23 hours of nothing," that small movement made him tense. "But you came for us anyway," she said. "You looked at our small planet and our weak bodies and our primitive technology, and you decided we would be easy prey. You thought you could take whatever you wanted because that is what the Dominion has always done. Her eyes met his. And for just a moment, he saw something ancient in them, something that predated starships and cities and civilization itself. We are not easy prey. Commander, we never were. The galaxy is going to learn that lesson eventually. And I hope they learn it the way you did today, through patience and understanding, instead of blood and fire. She paused and let that sink in. But if they choose blood and fire instead, she said softly, then we will give them that too, and we will be patient about it, and we will remember every wrong done to us, and we will follow whoever harms us across every light year and through every generation until justice is done. She turned away from him and walked toward the doors. Humanity's combat doctrine, she said over her shoulder, is this. We prefer to sit and wait, but if you force us to stand, you will wish we had stayed seated. The chamber doors opened before her, and she walked through them without looking back behind her. The tribunal chamber sat in stunned silence. Commander Vethril stared at the empty chair in the center of the room. Just a simple chair. Just a piece of furniture. And he felt something he had not felt since he was a young soldier facing his first battle fear. Not the sharp fear of immediate danger, but the deep, cold fear of knowing that the universe was larger and stranger than he had ever imagined. He had conquered 11 species. He had won 100 battles, and he had just been defeated by a woman who sat in a chair and smiled at him for 23 hours 50 cycles later. The Galactic Archives would record humanity's formal entry into the community of spacefaring civilizations under their species profile. In the section reserved for combat doctrine, a single phrase was listed. Patient observation, humanity does not strike first. They simply ensure that any who strike at them understand what will follow. Historians would debate the exact wording for centuries afterward. But the meaning was clear. Do not start a fight with humans unless you are prepared to finish it, and finishing a fight with humans, as the Dominion had learned, was not as simple as winning a battle, because battles end. But patience does not wars have victors. But endurance recognizes no surrender, and prey that is not afraid of you is not really prey at Lin, a small room on Earth. Many light years from the tribunal chamber, Captain Elise Morrow sat in a comfortable chair and watched the sunset through her window. Her bones ached from the long journey home, and her muscles were still stiff from those 23 hours of stillness, but she was smiling, somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between the stars. The word was spreading. The humans were not to be touched. The humans were patient. The humans remembered, and in the end, that was all the defense humanity had ever needed. She leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and let herself rest. At last the galaxy could wait after all. She had taught them that waiting was what humans did best.